People always ask me, sort of, why do you do what you do? And it's really difficult to describe. I mean, if you're an artist and you say it's always been within me, or a doctor and it's a vocation, people find that very easy to understand. And it's inexplicable to me, so I can't really expect other people to understand it, but I've always known, from as young as I can remember, that I wanted to work with children in poverty and poverty alleviation.
You know what is this? This is soup, yes. Mixed vegetable and beef. I think it's got all the ingredients, vitamins and minerals and all that stuff. So these 3 pots can feed almost close to 800 people.
Maybe I'm just really naive. It's always stayed with me that if we shared more of our wealth and ran businesses that gave more away, there's plenty for us and there's plenty for others too. The charitable projects that result from the profits that we make, we have fantastic street children project in Vietnam, medical program in Vietnam. In Mongolia we work with children in the sewers. In China I have factories at the moment, and there are 336 people employed in those projects. We're just starting in Eastern Timor, setting up trust banks, which are very low interest to support people to start their own businesses. We have built 4 schools in Ghana, put together food security for 25,000 people. In Kenya I've worked with mentally and physically handicapped. We have a sponsorship program for girls in the north of Zambia, and that allows girls who would otherwise have to be taken out of school to continue their education. Then there's a feeding program in South Africa. As soon as I actually started working in the field, I realised really what was needed was giving people who have no alternative source of income a way of making a living in a way that doesn't destroy the environment and in a way that gives them enough food for them and their families. I came to Africa and found a community who were facing food security problems, famine problems, and suggested to the chiefs in the area that we should make little pendants. And I brought the pendants back because I had to sell those pendants, and that was the beginning. And sooner or later I was able to go back to the community and set up 300 people producing product. And that's what they wanted. They wanted to be able to produce a product. I took back the money. They were there ready to give me the next lot, the next batch. The chief, on the last day that I was there, his words were, you know, you allowed us to retain our past and shape our future, and that's what we do. It occurred to me this year that we have to do more. We have to raise more funds, we have to go into more communities, create more employment, have more leverage to be able to bring in very significant orders. So we thought of this idea of asking the leaders of the world, and maybe 120 of them in their field, in film, royalty, in theatre, in comedy, in TV, chefs, whatever people admired, unsung heroes, politicians, all sorts of world leaders, to give us a piece of artwork. And we called it 21st Century Leaders because that's what they essentially are. And this is the sort of package they now receive. It's like an activity set. It's sort of inspired by a children's activity set, but it's a world leaders activity set. We've got the first artwork from Samuel Jackson, and he taught me about the spirit of Ubuntu.
How does it feel?
It feels great. It feels fantastic. We've started, and he's going to try and get Juliette Binoche for us too. So it's really exciting, and he was a very decent man. And we've asked them to draw an image which for them symbolises something positive about the 21st century, to create or to give us a message of hope for the beneficiaries of the programme, and obviously they're going to sign it as well and date it. But what we want to do with the artwork is not sell it and have a one-off payment, but instead use the artwork to be able to go to factories all over the world, and they will take that image to put it onto a plate. That creates employment ethically in developing countries, and that will hopefully help us to raise not hundreds of thousands as we have been doing, but millions a year.
children that
The children at the school in this area.
From this area.
And so they actually come from here and they go to school in the school that we're supplying?
Yes.
Inevitably, crime, violence, and no training opportunities, no hope. I mean, 4 or 5 children to one family, many of the women are on their own. People don't eat for 2 or 3 days, that they have no means to feed themselves whatsoever. There's no social welfare programme that allows that. But worse still, the elderly and the infirm, and many people suffering from HIV, many people suffering from TB, which are quite common here, they do receive medication, but they can't actually take their medication because they don't have anything to eat, and you have to be able to eat when you take the medicine or it simply doesn't stay down. Well, I suppose there were 2 very significant experiences in both huts I went into. The first was a witch doctor's medication place, and that was shocking because there he was bleeding the girl, and he was cutting her all over her legs and arms, and he was cutting her with a knife that clearly had never been sterilised and had been used many, many times before, and would be used again. And I asked him what she was suffering from, and he said a stroke, and even with my very rudimentary medical knowledge, it was clear she didn't have a stroke, and she had lesions on her lip which are not directly an AIDS symptom, but are highly likely to show a low immune system and symptomatic of that. And here he was literally cutting her and bleeding her with a knife, which he would probably use a few hours later. So it's a sort of desperation of, that's such a basic hygiene problem. Earlier on this year, I heard the sort of tragic story that a myth has circulated very, very rapidly throughout Africa, and as unbelievable as it sounds to us, people believe, and the myth is precipitated, that if you suffer from HIV or you have AIDS, you can pass that disease on and away from yourself if you have sex with a child under the age of 7. And that's one myth. Another is if she's a virgin, another if she's under the age of 3. And the figures in South Africa have drastically increased for child rape and even infantile rape, within families. I mean, it's just too unbearable and too unbelievable, but it is true. And as you wander around and you say to people, is this really true? And they say, yes, 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 it's a common belief. So we've paid, it's a very small project for the moment, but we've paid for an initial 2 counsellors, and we'd like to go on and do more later on, to be trained specifically in child rape issues and battered women issues, because quite often apparently domestic violence and rape issues go hand in hand in South Africa, as they probably do elsewhere. And so that's another sort of very new project for us. We've only just funded it, and we hope to sort of make some sort of significant effort in that direction as well. Because of the conditions that the children are coming from, many days the children come to school with no food in their stomachs, and as we know, they wouldn't be able to study or concentrate in that way. So the idea is for the kids, where at least twice a week initially, and we hope to do maybe every day eventually if we can raise enough funds to do so, so that they have food in their stomachs when they're studying, and they get at least a cooked meal a day, which would be likely to encourage the children to come to school, likely to encourage the parents to keep them in the school, and most importantly, give them the opportunity to be able to have the sustenance to study on.
Well, my idea for this plate is inspired by a poem I read, or that actually I didn't read, someone else read at a Human Rights Watch evening, and I was really taken by it. And it's about revenge, but revenge in the opposite to how you might imagine. Instead of punching someone, you give them flowers. So it's a sort of a way of forgiving through forgiveness as a kind of theme of revenge. Polaroids, which I love Polaroids. I think you can get some really interesting pictures out of them, and I take Polaroids whenever I travel, but unfortunately the focus hasn't been too good on these, so I've just tried to Polaroid hands, and I was thinking of superimposing them because the poem touches on a line about shaking hands. There's so many areas and not enough funds, but what I would like to see happen is maybe some of the funds go towards education, especially towards children in Africa. I've just got back from Angola. That had a big impression on me there, and it's a country torn apart by war, 40 years of war, 27 years of civil war, and you have a generation of children because the other elder generations have disappeared because of war. So I was really struck by the spirit and the enthusiasm and the potential of these young children, and how desperate they are to find an outlet for their potential. And so I would very much hope that my funds would go towards the education of children in places like Angola. Well, Shut is really quite unique because there's a few big organisations and charities which also do what Charlotte's doing, and she's very much on her own, and I've got so much respect for someone campaigning on their own, and she's gone out to the front line. She knows what she's talking about. She's done extraordinary work in education and alleviating poverty and bringing food to children that otherwise would starve. And from what I've seen, she's been right out there committed and on the front line, and those are the people I like to work with because those are the people who I know are very much in tune with what's going on at a street level, who have really witnessed it firsthand, and she's one of those few, so it's great to be involved with her.